Hi, I'm Mike Licona. I'm in Berkeley, California, and they're wrapping up the Evangelical Philosophical Society Apologetics Conference. And I'm with a dear friend of mine, Paul Copan, who is a professor of philosophy at West Palm Beach University, and he is the current president of the Evangelical Philosophical Society. And Paul has become somewhat of the go-to guy when it comes to the atrocities that are often cited within the Old Testament. So, Paul, thanks for allowing us to videotape you.
Sure, no problem. Glad to be here.
All right, give me a real quick answer here. Real quick, yeah. But if someone brought up, what about all the genocide in the Old Testament? What would you say?
Well, for one thing, it's not ethnically directed. The same sort of language that is used of the Canaanites is also used of the Israelites and other nations that are living in rebellion against God and doing all sorts of atrocious things. So the sorts of language, this kind of language that is being applied to the Canaanites should not be understood in sort of an xenophobic or ethnically hostile way, but rather it's directed toward any kind of disobedience to God that becomes so corrupted and destructive of not only the culture itself, but also having an influence on cultures outside of that culture. Secondly, God waits for the sin of the Canaanites to be filled up. Genesis 15:16. So during the time of Abraham is not right for judgment. That comes 400 years later. You also have mention of the language of driving out the Canaanites, which if you're dispossessing or driving out the Canaanites, then you don't actually kill Canaanites. Adam and Eve were driven out of the garden. Cain was driven out from where he had been. The same language that is used there, it's applied to the Israelites driving out the Canaanites. You also have parallel to or next to passages that talk about people being obliterated. You also have language of lots of survivors. Read Judges 1 and 2. So if Joshua has done all that Moses commanded, which is repeated throughout Joshua, but yet we see throughout the book of Joshua survivors. In fact, in one portion in Joshua chapter 8, I believe, there are foreigners who are with the Israelites during the reading of the law by Joshua. And these are, scholars would concur, these are Canaanites themselves who are interested in the worship of Yahweh. So you have that. You also have archaeological indicators that this was not some sort of a massive military assault, but rather hitting places like Jericho and Ai and so forth, which were more like fortresses or citadels where the civilian population was elsewhere. This was the first line of defense. So you don't have actually the people of the general populace living in these cities themselves. Furthermore, you have the exaggerated language that is quite common in the ancient Near East, language of utterly destroying, utterly decimating, obliterating, etc. You could have a narrow victory in the ancient Near East, and it would be said that everything was obliterated. There's no survivor left. Even though there are tons of survivors. For instance, one Moabite king wrote, "Israel is no more." Well, Moab actually is no more. That was certainly not true. And it's also interesting that it wasn't true in a literal sense. Also, you have in Jeremiah 25:9, you have the term that is used for utterly destroy. It is used of the people of Judah, that when Babylon comes in, God said he's going to utterly destroy Judah. He's going to leave their towns in everlasting ruin. Did that literally happen? No, it did not. We see the urban elite going off from Jerusalem to Babylon, but we see the rest of the population that wasn't killed in, basically when the Babylonians came in and disarmed and rendered ineffective the the Judahite armies. Those people stay in the land. There are lots of people left behind. Did God literally, utterly destroy them? No, but that's precisely the point. This language should not be taken in the strict literalistic sense, but rather in a hyperbolized sense, which would have been readily understood during the time of Moses and Joshua.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate your input on this. For more on this, see Paul's book, Is God a Moral Monster?